Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Rob Adams, and you are in the Abyss. As we go into 1986, I've been battling a dilemma with giving you guys this list of movies to watch if you've never seen or revisit if you haven't seen them in a long time. And it's battled between do I give you all of these movies or do I cut the list down? And what I'm discovering looking back at a few episodes now is I end up missing some of the movies I should have shown you. For example, Salem's Lot in '79, great horror film starring David Soul. All the Right Moves with Tom Cruise and Craig T. Nelson in 1983. Last year, 1985, you know, one of the greatest comedies of all time for me, Spies Like Us with Chevy Chase and Dan Aykroyd, an unbelievable film. And then Heaven Help Us, another fun comedy with Kevin Dillon, who of course was drama in the Entourage TV series. But so I think the best thing for me is to be able to just give you the list, let you guys write them down, and then watch, at your own leisure. When you get a chance to sit down and watch something, or if something piques your interest, then watch it. So for '86, I'm going to give you another pretty strong list. Write them down, and then watch them when you can. So starting off, we were just talking about Chevy Chase, The Three Amigos, also starring Martin Short and Steve Martin. It's a fun comedy. They're actors who get caught in a situation where they think they're in the middle of making a movie or whatever, and it turns out that it's real life, and they have to deal for real. Anytime you get acting within acting, it's always fun and it's always a great comedy. So this is a good one. Next up in the comedy section, Paul Hogan's legendary role of Crocodile Dundee. It's a fun '80s film. It's a unique story. I mean, he knocks it out of the park, and it's fun. You get some in Australia and you get some in New York City, so it's another really good fun comedy for the '80s. Next up is one we all know, Pretty in Pink. Not necessarily my favorite of these movies, but I wanted to point it out because I think the acting is pretty strong. Molly Ringwald does a great job. I mean, she was pretty consistent in the '80s. Andrew McCarthy, a really good underrated actor. John Cryer in his legendary role of Ducky, and then James Spader, who plays Andrew McCarthy's friend Steph. And I mean, just how dry he is, and he's so Spader-esque, and he's such a jerk in the movie that it's just he's awesome. And to me, I watch Pretty in Pink for James Spader. He hits it out of the park. Next up, I got a couple of Bette Midler comedies. First one I'm going to show you is Down and Out in Beverly Hills with Richard Dreyfuss and Nick Nolte. I actually saw this one in the movie theater, and I remember because there's a famous scene of Richard Dreyfuss running with the phone, and Nick Nolte jumps in the pool trying to drown himself, and he's yelling 911, call 911, call 911, while he's holding the phone in his hand. I remember just laughing, and it's such an iconic moment in the film. Funny that it stays with me after all these years. I remember sitting in the theater laughing. But it's a good film. Nick Nolte's a bum who's trying that they bring into their rich life, and every time he threatens to leave it, he has a hard time leaving it. It's just really, really good. And I think Bette Midler was really, really good in the '80s with her comedy and her timing and stuff. She just did a really, really good job, which kind of segues into this one, Ruthless People, Danny DeVito, Judge Reinhold, Helen Slater. And then you have a young Bill Pullman, one of his first roles. And it just has some of the most iconic one-liners. It's a funny, fun film. And it's by far, to me, probably top 20 comedies of all time for me. So if you haven't seen it, check it out. Next up in the comedies, Rodney Dangerfield, Back to School. What can I say about Rodney? He knew who he was, and he mastered it and didn't try to go outside of that. And you're never going to make a list of great actors of all time and put Rodney Dangerfield on there. However, Rodney Dangerfield did what Rodney Dangerfield did, and he was consistent at it, and that's what made his films really, really strong. Whether it be Caddyshack or Easy Money, Ladybugs, but Back to School is probably his most iconic, and it's just awesome. I was watching it the other night, and I still just laugh at parts that I've seen 100 times. He's just really good, and he's exactly what you want in an actor. Be yourself. All right, switching gears a little bit. A couple darker films. The Fly, starring Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis. This is a remake. However, it's very different than the Vincent Price Fly, just in the way that the experiment of becoming the Fly happens, and actually how the Fly is once he turns into that. This is another one I saw in the theaters, and I was just blown away with how cool this movie is. It's a fun sci-fi horror film, but I also do recommend to watch the original with Vincent Price. It is really well done as well, and it's two different films, which makes you, even though they're a remake, it lets you watch two separate films, which is cool. The other one is Manhunter. This is the first of the Hannibal Lecter movies. Although in this movie, Hannibal Lecter is played by Brian Cox, who is just awesome. And it's unfortunate that he kind of gets lost in the Hannibal Lecter movies because of how good Anthony Hopkins was in Silence of the Lambs and so on. But Brian Cox in his own right was really, really good. It also stars William Peterson, who is the lead. You might know him from CSI. He's really, really good as the cop. And they're investigating, a serial killer. And he's getting the help from Hannibal Lecter. I like this one better than Silence of the Lambs, and I know Silence of the Lambs is awesome, and I own it and I love it. But I just think Manhunter is better, and it's a stronger film. And they actually tried to remake it, and they called it Red Dragon, and it did not even come close to how good this film is. That tells you how good this film really is. You need to check it out. All right. Next, we got a couple of Tom Cruise movies. First one I'm going to show you is The Color of Money, directed by Martin Scorsese. Paul Newman reprising his role as Fast Eddie Felson from the original movie The Hustler, where he is a pool shark hustling, Minnesota Fats, who is played by Jackie Gleason, etc. What's cool about this is because it was made so many years later, it almost stands on its own. I would recommend to watch The Hustler and then watch this, but if you can't or you don't want to, this can stand on its own. I actually think I saw this before I saw The Hustler when I was a kid, but this is a really, really good film. You can't go wrong with Paul Newman, and you definitely can't go wrong with Tom Cruise, and directed by Martin Scorsese, like I said. The other one, probably doesn't surprise you, is Top Gun. There's not a lot to be said. We all know it. Sequel's coming out later this year, but this is the movie to me that really propelled Tom Cruise into superstardom, and he's basically sustained that superstardom all the way to present day. I've said for years, I believe that Tom Cruise is the biggest movie star of all time. He was big in the 80s, and he's still big 2020, and he hasn't really slowed down. He's just gone. And just being the best, to me, being the greatest movie star of all time doesn't necessarily mean the best actor, but you have to pretty much know who you are and know how to do this to sustain that longevity as a movie star. So I got to give a lot of props to Tom Cruise. He knows what he's doing. Okay, next in line, Clint Eastwood, Heartbreak Ridge. Clint Eastwood's another one of those actors, just knows who he is. He doesn't change for the role changes for him. It's like he's getting a new job, right? He's Clint Eastwood, and he's working the new job, and he just adapts to it, right? It doesn't matter if it's Dirty Harry, or it's one of his westerns, or it's Heartbreak Ridge. In this one, he is an aging drill sergeant in the Marines who is assigned to recon, and he's got to get this group of misfits in line to be able to battle, to be able to stay alive. And he does it in Eastwood form with his one-liners and his fights and his drinking and everything else that Eastwood does in all of his movies. I mean, he has a formula, and he's mastered it, and he's an icon because of it. And that's what acting's all about. Okay, couple sports movies for you guys. Youngblood, starring Rob Lowe, Patrick Swayze. It's a hockey movie about youth hockey. Cynthia Gibb is the love interest. She's terrific in it. Just a fun, romantic sports movie. I wouldn't say romantic comedy. It has some moments, but it's a sports movie with romance in it. One of my favorite sports films. The next one, Best of Times. Kurt Russell, Robin Williams. This one is funny. Kurt Russell plays Reno Hightower, who was a superstar high school quarterback for Taft High School. Robin Williams plays Jack Dundee, who was basically a backup wide receiver. And in the biggest game, when they have a chance to beat their rival Bakersfield for the first time in how many years, Robin Williams drops the ball. And the whole thing is about that he's known as the guy who drops the ball. And he comes up with the idea of replaying the game. And the whole story is about them trying to get this back together, which makes a really fun film. Once again, one of my favorite sports films. So, you got Youngblood, hockey, and you got Best of Times, football. All right, another one of my all-time favorite films, At Close Range, with Christopher Walken and Sean Penn, Mary Stuart Masterson. You have, on a smaller scale, Chris Penn, Kiefer Sutherland, Crispin Glover. So you have a really, really good cast. This has been one of my favorite films of all time. I'm waiting for this one on Blu-ray. I mean, once again, I love Christopher Walken, and to be able to see him in this, it's incredible. He's a thief. He kind of gets his sons involved in it, and it kind of goes haywire. And it's just, I've shown the clips in class. It's off the charts. It's a must watch. All right, down to our last few. Kurt Russell again. Big Trouble in Little China. Kim Cattrall as the girl. I've mentioned two directors over the last probably 10 episodes the most, and that's Brian De Palma and John Carpenter. And this is another Carpenter film. This is when he started using Kurt Russell in some of his stuff. And this is a fun movie, originally kind of a cult classic that kind of became a pop culture classic. And it's just a really fun comedy, action, adventure, mystery. It's just a really good film. Kurt Russell's one of those other actors we've been talking about with Eastwood, knowing himself, and Dangerfield even. Kurt Russell is kind of like Kevin Kline. He's just really consistently good and flies under the radar and just does his job. And we love everything that he's in, right? And it doesn't matter. And this is just another one of those films. We just talked about Best of Times. Excuse me. This is just a really good, strong film. All right, so I'm down to my final three, and this was really, really tough because these three films are interchangeable. I love them all, but I had to pick one. So first one I want to show you guys is Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Not a lot to be said. We know it. Matthew Broderick's home run role. Alan Ruck as his buddy Cameron. Jeffrey Jones as the principal, right? Mia Sara as the girlfriend. It's a great comedy. Stands the test of time. Never gets old. We can watch it a million times, but not my favorite for 86. So it really came down to these last two. Runner-up's going to be Hoosiers. Once again, it's Gene Hackman, another consistent actor. He's terrific. I love all of his movies. He's a basketball coach in this, coaching a small high school in Indiana who ends up winning the state championship. Sorry, spoiler, it's a true story. But it's just really good, and it's really strong, and it never gets old. This is another one that was on the other day, and I just watched the whole thing. Once I capture it, I go, right? But it's just short of this other film, which I always watch, and that is Running Scared, starring Billy Crystal and Gregory Hines. They're two Chicago cops, and they're chasing down Jimmy Smits, who's like, it's his first role in film, and he's kind of the bad guy. And there's just so many great one-liners, and the timing is impeccable. And you would think that they were real partners. They just bounce off each other so well. Gregory Hines, who we know from the dancing and all that kind of stuff, he has such great comedy chops. And playing off Billy Crystal, and Billy Crystal playing off of him is just so much fun. And I'm surprised they never used him again in anything up until, unfortunately, Gregory Hines passed away. But this film is awesome, and it's definitely one of my top favorites, and it's my favorite for 1986. Okay, real quick on the music side. Billy Joel, The Bridge, is the first tour that I saw Billy Joel on. So, I really like this. I really like this album. I really like this tour. He's terrific live. It has A Matter of Trust, which was a big hit off of this. Running on Ice, which is great. Baby Grand, which he sang with Ray Charles. Modern Woman, which was a song they used in Ruthless People, which we just talked about, that movie. And then an awesome song called "This Is the Time," which I use in our wedding video. That's how great of a song it is. So a really really good um, album to check out. Next up is Brian Setzer, "The Knife Feels Like Justice." We know Brian Setzer from the Stray Cats, and then later on from his big band, Brian Setzer Orchestra. This was his first solo album. It's really strong. It's not really rockabilly, and it's not really big band. It's kind of just like a good, straightforward rock album. The title track is phenomenal. Boulevard of Broken Dreams is a song that I always put on like a best of that I like to listen to. Haunted River is great. It's fun. There's actually a song on here called Radiation Ranch, which he used the music later on with his orchestra and called it Drive Like Lightning, Crash Like Thunder, and just changed up the lyrics. So it's kind of fun to hear it as a rocker and then more of a big band orchestra type song. But it's a really strong album to give it a listen to. All right, so now we're down to my last two, Judas Priest, Turbo. This was on loop, when I was a junior in high school in 1986. Turbo Lover, Parental Guidance, Private Property, Out in the Cold, which they opened their tour with. This is great. And then, of course, the awesome Locked In, which my buddy Mark and I used to sing all the time. We go back and forth with lines, etc. And, every time I hear that song, you can't help but think of those memories. It's funny. Now we're into 2020, and it's not necessarily my favorite Judas Priest album anymore. There's other ones I like better. But, at the time, this was iconic, and it was something I loved to listen to, and I listened to it over and over again. And it's good to point out it's a really strong record. But it is second to my number one for 1986, and that's Iron Maiden, Somewhere in Time. And as you can see, the progression of Eddie, he's kind of a cyborg now, kind of a robot, human type thing. And, what's cool is in the artwork, and you really can't see it on the CD, but on the album, front and back, there's so much different things. They have buildings with different names of like their song titles and stuff. And, there's Batman in there, and there's a lot of hidden things in there. The artwork is really in depth, is what I'm getting at. And if you ever get a chance to just look up Somewhere in Time artwork and just look at it, there's so much in there. Like I said, a mixture of their songs and their, and things that, just are just all over the place. There's a Mickey Mouse in there, I think. It's really, really cool. As for the music, this is phenomenal. Caught Somewhere in Time, the mega hit Wasted Years, Sea of Madness, Heaven Can Wait, which is a live staple for them. The Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner, Stranger in a Strange Land, Deja Vu, and then it ends with Alexander the Great. And like I say, with these hard rock heavy metal bands, they write a lot about historical events and people. And this is another one of those, journeys about Alexander the Great that it's just phenomenal. And it's a great album ender. And it's a history lesson. So you're getting the great music, but you're also getting a little bit of a history lesson, which is always a great thing. So my number one in 1986 is Iron Maiden's Somewhere in Time. And like I said, on the film side, Billy Crystal, Gregory Hines, Running Scared. All right, you guys. Don't forget, once again, hit that like button, give me some comments, and we will see you tomorrow.